Welcome to USC Trojans Postgame Live here on the USC channel with the voice of college football, Matt Zemek with Ethan Inman and Crash Lit Collier coming at you, giving you the USC analysis and insight that you crave. And, we don't disagree for the sake of disagreement. But if there's an organic, honest disagreement, we'll pursue that. So let's start right out of the box, all right? Like a Shohei Ohtani 100-mile-an-hour cutter, first inning. Like we're not going to save anything. We're just going to attack, get right at you here at the voice of college football. So USC beats Michigan State. Ethan, Crash, you're telling me your view of D'Anton Lynn overall generally positive. I have some disagreements, but first, let me give each of you the floor. Ethan first, Crash second.
Sure. I think that I'm still really high on how the run defense performed in this game. I believe Michigan State had around 3.5 yards per rush, so not too terrible. You know, there was like one drive where it felt like we were going back to the Georgia Southern where there was like 3 or 4 10-yard rushes in a row. I think that was after the running into the kicker penalty, that drive, but I'm not 100% certain. But there was definitely one drive where it felt like we were kind of reverting back to the Georgia Southern style of run defense. But other than that, I thought that the run defense was very solid. Obviously, put a lot of pressure all game pretty consistently on Aiden Childs. He was more mobile, so he was getting out of it. And they only sacked him twice. But another thing about the run defense, I thought, a lot of tackles for loss on run plays. I think there was 7 total tackles for loss and 2 sacks. So that means 5 on run plays. So solid there. And then thought that, I think that my biggest, kind of gripe and area of concern is obviously the big plays, because you had, there are 2 or 3 like really big plays in this game that, we didn't really see last game. So not really too thrilled with that. But I think that there are some reasons to be optimistic about the pass defense, which is that this is the second least passing yards they've allowed in a game. So that's a good note. The only one that was less was Missouri State, which, obviously basically an FCS team that just became an FBS team. So not bad there. And, Aiden Childs is a better prospect. I think that Ryan Brown is a better quarterback right now. But, so I think that is a positive note to take away from this. I thought that DeCarlos Nicholson played really well, and they shut down Nick Marsh. Nick Marsh only had, 2 catches for 16 yards. So he's the best receiver USC's played so far and is potentially the best receiver they'll play this year. So I thought that was pretty good note for them there. And then I just think I feel like I still am not loving Kamari Ramsey playing at the nickel, but I do think this was his best game so far this season, which again is not saying much. The bar is really low, but I felt like at least his impact was felt a little bit this game. So he seems to be improving at the nickel spot, even though I don't think the nickel spot is the best spot for him. Obviously, we've litigated that in weeks past, but he had USC's only pass breakup in this game and had, I think, a couple more tackles than he's had in any other game. So better from him. So I just think, even though, there's still the big concerns, the busted plays, going back to those is obviously a big issue. I think that there are some positive things to take away that show improvement, and not, other than the busted plays, not too much to make me feel like they're regressing. So that's why I feel like, and the discipline is obviously an issue as well. And I'm sure that you're going to harp on that, Matt. And so I'm excited to hear what you have to say about that. But
we'll get to me in a bit. Let's get Crash's take on this.
So I think overall I was impressed with how the defense played for the most part. I think obviously you got to give Michigan State credit. They're a better offense than Purdue was that USC faced last week. That said, though, I was still really concerned whenever Aiden Childs just threw the ball deep. I just got really concerned anytime that ball was just in the secondary. That it pretty much made it there, I got worried, and that's pretty much how it seemed Michigan State was able to score during the game. Obviously, USC won pretty comfortably. It didn't quite cover, but still, it was definitely times where it got a little uncomfortable, especially when Aiden Childs was able to air it out. So I think definitely it's something that needs to, continue to be improved. But then the thing that just drives me insane was just the penalties, especially because most of them were on the defense. And I get, the occasional thing happens, but it's just so frustrating when just either drives are getting extended because someone just isn't able to stay disciplined and, play the game right, and ultimately just allow the Spartans, keep their drives going and often, and be able to score on a few of them as well.
All right, let me get both of your takes on this comment from loyal watcher, listener Jeff Rodriguez. If Lynn doesn't get Kamari back to leading this defense, we're going to drop a game between the mid-play of the non-Gentry linebackers, the blown coverages, and the penalties. Jeff also adds that currently this is taking away all of Kamari's advantages in the scheme. If he's just playing mid as nickel and he was the cornerstone at safety, it makes no sense. So Ethan, then Crash.
Yeah, Jeff, I've given a lot of thought to why Desmond Stevens is wearing the green dot and not Kamari Ramsey. The only thing that I can think of is that maybe Danton Lynn wants to, because Desmond Stevens is so inexperienced, it's kind of like one of those throw one of your young, seemingly talented, high potential players into the fire and kind of like try to, like, maybe since he's younger and less talented and less experienced, like it's like maybe almost holding his hand a little bit. Like, obviously you don't need to handhold Eric Gentry because he's one of the best defensive players in the country. But, with Desmond Stevens, he's a guy that might need a little bit of the extra coaching. So, beyond trying to press him into a leadership role on defense, maybe it's like also holding his hand a little bit. That's really the only thing I can think of. I'm totally with you there. I think giving the green dot back to someone who's a little bit more experienced, especially with the communication issues, is like 100% a great idea. And I'm still with you too on the moving Kamari back. I just have also given a lot of thought to moving Kamari back and who would replace him. And while these injuries are still the injuries that we have, I just don't really know what the solution is. So that's like my only, the only potential hiccup I see there. But yeah, I mean, great thoughts as always, Jeff.
Jeff, I think that's definitely something, like Ethan said, that does USC even just have like someone that can really fill the nickel spot. And it's just, they're just thinking, all right, Kamari's just the best guy for it, considering where the team is at with just their depth and injuries and just available personnel. So I think for that reason, I wouldn't be opposed to seeing them trying Kamari back at true safety and moving someone else to nickel. But I also can see where at least it seems like the coaches are coming from. As for Stevens wearing the green dot, though, I get why it's a linebacker, especially because they're more in the middle of the defense, and then that way they can more effectively relay information from the sideline to both the guys at the line of scrimmage as well as the guys in the secondary. So I can see why you'd want to put the green dot on a linebacker, but I still would think that wouldn't you want someone like Eric Gentry, who's the best linebacker in USC's on the team, relaying that information to everyone, especially because he's the best guy and knows the scheme pretty well, considering he's one of the more experienced guys and has been here longer than Lynn has.
All right. Well, so now I'm gonna weigh in, and I'm gonna say I'm not positive about this defense. Now, Jakeem Stewart, beast, dude. Like, of course, he was a rock star. He's living up to the billing. Thanos, as Ethan tweeted out during the game, Thanos, this good, this early. A great thing. But overall, like, Thanos can't play secondary. Thanos can't play the non-Eric Gentry linebacker positions. You need 11. If you have only 10 or 9, you're in trouble because teams are going to exploit you. What Crash said about the penalties, obviously true, but more than that, Lincoln Riley, obviously, he has Danton Lynn to run the defense. So, Lincoln Riley isn't going to be, deep into the defensive meetings. He's focused on the offensive game plan. And, we'll get to Lincoln Riley's brilliant play calling. He called an amazing game against Michigan State. But, of course, when you're the head coach, you're not just a play caller if you take on that responsibility. It's your shop. It's your operation. And people are going to say, well, what about Chad Bowden? Well, Chad Bowden has off the field. But on the field, this is Lincoln Riley's shop. This is his operation. It's his program. It's his culture. It comes from the top down. And the elite coaches, and Lincoln Riley was certainly elite at Oklahoma. all the Big 12 titles, the 3 straight college football playoffs. Like, he coached at an elite level at Oklahoma, no question about it. We're not relitigating that. He did. Even Oklahoma fans would admit that. Now, they'll say that, he dropped off toward the end. He lost a little bit of his fastball. Strength training tailed off. The things that he inherited in 2017, 2018 began to fade away a little bit. But, no question, from 2015, when he came in as Bob Stoops' offensive coordinator, and then when he steps in as the big chief in 2017, like, he was elite through 2019, no question about it. He's not elite right now, and USC needs him to be elite right now. And what that means is Lincoln Riley creating a culture of accountability with D'Anton Lynn and his defensive coaches. Like, I'm sure that Lincoln Riley wants to just, let D'Anton Lynn, do what he does. And of course, D'Anton Lynn has the collaborative model with Coach Henne, woof, woof, Rob Ryan, and Doug Belk, the defensive staff. But Lincoln Riley, if he's not intervening, he needs to intervene just a little bit and say, D'Anton, Eric, Doug, Rob, I've had enough of this. We cannot go on like this. Like, a message needs to be sent. I'm not saying the message isn't being sent, but what I am saying, it's not getting through. If the words are being communicated, if the ideas are being conveyed, it's not sinking in. It's not taking root. The elite coaches make sure it takes root. And so we're 4 games into the season, and I hate to be Debbie Downer, but like this is just the way I see it, and it's the way I feel. So I have to say it here at the Voice of College Football. This is reminding me of 2023. Soft, cupcakey early season schedule. You get into the start of conference play. You win some messy, high-scoring games, and you get a big lead, and that big lead becomes a 1-score game. Now, this wasn't a squeaker, all right, but this felt kind of like Colorado 2 years ago. USC gets the huge lead. Colorado whittles it down, and it just became a little bit uncomfortable in the fourth quarter. I did not expect to be here. And when I say here, I mean a D'Anton Lynn defense presiding over an Alex Grinch-style pattern of having a game that should be, tucked away, bedtime, go to sleep, and you let Michigan State right back into the game. Up 21, became up by 7 pretty quickly, and just all these absolutely idiotic mistakes. Now, did the Michigan State punter flop? And was that actual running into the punter? No, it wasn't. It was a flop. It was Hollywood. But why are you rushing the punter up 21? You should be in punt safe. Like, that should not be a question. That should not be a debate. You should not be within 10 miles of the punter up 21. You just let him punt the ball. Football IQ, football intelligence, time and score, game awareness, elite coaching staffs do not mess this stuff up. Lincoln Riley continues to mess this stuff up. And until USC proves that it's at the expected standard, and it's not there. Until USC proves it's at the expected standard, this staff does not deserve the benefit of the doubt. Now, you could say D'Anton Lynn deserves a certain benefit of the doubt, given that he whipped UCLA into shape, and then last year he immediately improved the defense that he inherited from Alex Grinch, to a certain extent. But D'Anton Lynn is good at fixing things immediately. It took just 1 year for him to improve UCLA. It took just 1 year for him to make significant improvements last season at USC. So why aren't those improvements from 2024 manifesting in 2025? Something's off. This is not the D'Anton Lynn we saw last season in terms of getting things fixed, getting things streamlined. Last season, when USC did struggle on defense, it wasn't scheme. It was Eric Gentry and Anthony Lucas getting hurt, and USC just not having the bodies up front to be able to deal with the full Big Ten season. This was not a schematic failure. But now this year, there is more depth up front. The secondary was supposed to be good. Now the secondary doesn't have as much depth. So like there's still, I think, a fair debate to be had there. Danton Lynn doesn't have all the studs in the stable in the secondary. No Prophet Brown and other injuries. That matters. So I'll give Danton Lynn that. But for the penalties and just these clumsy, silly, low football IQ plays to be made, like that was Alex Grinch. I did not expect that to be persisting to the extent that it is at USC. And so the transition, and as I get back to Ethan and Crash, is that, Ethan, I believe you said that Ryan Brown of Purdue better than Aiden Childs. I agree. Aiden Childs was not processing plays very smoothly. And, if I'm a Michigan State fan, I'm going insane because why weren't you running this guy? Why weren't you using scripted running plays and design runs to, USC struggles with mobile quarterbacks. Why aren't you having this dude run? And he's fast. Childs is fast. And yet Michigan State and Jonathan Smith didn't seem to be taking advantage of that. So I felt that, Michigan State's play selection scheme was not very good. And so a better coached game for Michigan State could have made this game even more uncomfortable. So as we get to this recurring point that what happens, and this really sums up my frustration with the defense and Danton Lynn. What happens when you go up against a good quarterback? What happens when you go up against an opponent who does it the right way, doesn't give you mistakes, and you have a full offensive unit that's able to expose your weaknesses? What then? And we don't know if Illinois is going to be that opponent. And we're not going to get into an Illinois preview. That's going to be on Tuesday because we do preview Tuesdays. This is for reviewing. But just the larger question, gentlemen, I'm going to go to Ethan first, Crash second. What happens when a better opponent playing better steps up to the plate against this defense? I don't have confidence. So, if you're positive about the defense, that tells me that you're fundamentally confident that, if an opponent steps up, Danton Lynn and this unit will be ready. Just speaking for myself, I do not have that confidence right now. Ethan first, Crash second.
Sure. I think, and Bob kind of chimed in the chat here and said, what good quarterback? That's kind of how I feel at the moment. I don't really feel like there's any incredible quarterbacks on the schedule. I think that Luke Altmaier is overrated. I think that Raiola hasn't been that. I think Raiola's at this point probably the best quarterback that USC is going to fit. Well, Dante Moore. Oregon is the one game where I'd say their offense truly scares me, and I'm really, really worried about how this defense is going to hold up. But other than that, I just haven't really seen anything from any of the other. Unless you want to count, Notre Dame had a good game. It's Notre Dame's first win, so I'm not, if they put together a couple more great offensive performances, Marcus Freeman tends to improve as the season goes on. But those were games that we were concerned about before the season started anyway. So I'm just not super thrilled about the rest of the quarterback play. Now, obviously, we can't rely on other teams laying down and dying for us to survive. That's a terrible way to go about things. Is Danton Lynn just crossing his fingers and saying, "Well, I hope and pray everybody's worse," and then that's the way that we're going to win football. That's obviously not what I'm saying. I think that I agree with you that there's concerns to be had. I'm not, sitting up here feeling fantastic. Do I see shades of 2023? I do. But do I see some shades of 2022 in the schedule? Also kind of yes. Which is, 2022, I don't think the defense was particularly great either. I think that they just never played anybody all that good other than Utah. So, and then, Tulane hangs 40 plus on them in the bowl game. Bowl. Yeah. So, I think that truly showed how great that defense was, which was not at all. Anyway, I just think
Ethan, you went there 2022. Let's just talk about that. Because the obvious outstanding feature of the 2022 defense, for anyone who remembers that season, and like, I do, I mean, probably most of the people watching here do, the thing was, USC was taking away the ball in the first half of the season, first 6 or 7 games. And then the turnover faucet went off. USC stopped taking away the ball, and then opponents were scoring a lot more points. Similarities here, right? If USC is not getting takeaways, Bishop Fitzgerald with those multiple interceptions against Purdue, this is a vulnerable, exposed defense. I will say the defense did do better at getting off the field 3rd and long in this game. Better. Not massive improvement, but definite improvement. Like Purdue was bad. This was better, but still, if this defense isn't turning people over, Michigan State was able to churn some clock and get a lot of 8, 9, 10 play drives in the instances when it didn't go 3 and out. So like that parallel to 2022 with the defense not getting turnovers and being exposed, that's kind of a parallel there.
I think the one thing I'm going to pivot a little bit to the one thing that makes me confident, and it is the improvement of the defensive line. And I think that that's also the one thing that makes me confident that we can create turnovers, because even if, like I said, I don't really believe the quarterbacks that we're playing from here on out are particularly great. And I just think that even if the secondary is not fantastic, and, I think that we have enough talent on the defensive line that we're going to wreak havoc on opposing quarterbacks, and we're going to wreak havoc on opposing running backs and make them make mistakes. And I think that, so I don't think that last night's, because they didn't create any turnovers last night, that's obviously a point of something we could talk about. First game this year, they haven't created any turnovers. But I think that uniquely has to do with Aiden Childs' mobility, because, I kind of was harping on him in the preview for holding onto the ball too long. I still think he did that and didn't make great decisions, but he did manage to kind of, be sort of slippery and evade he was getting pressure on him consistently, but wasn't getting put on the ground. I don't think there's a ton of mobility on the schedule of quarterbacks outside of him. So I just think that we're going to put enough pressure on opposing offenses that way. And I think you're going to see some more similar strategy that Danton Lynn had in the Purdue game, which I think that the Purdue game was Danton Lynn's best game strategically to this point, which again, all 4 games have had their defensive issues. So it's not saying a ton, but I do think that if we can kind of stick to that, and we can get some of the defensive players back who are injured, including Prophet Brown, who's not supposed to be out for the season, and Alex Graham, then I think we'll be all right. And I mean, we'll get to the offense later in the show, but I just am feeling so great about this offense. Again, with the exception of, can the offense stay healthy? I think that that's a big question. But I'm feeling so great about this offense and I do think that this defensive line has improved to become one of the best, units in the country, that I think we can survive, is my point.
All right, Crash. So a lot on your plate. So there was the earlier discussion about, what happens when USC plays a better quarterback, or not necessarily a better quarterback, but a quarterback who plays better than what we've seen so far. And this other 2022 tangent about, if USC isn't forcing turnovers, just how concerned are you about the USC defense? So each of those 2 things on your platter right now.
Okay, so I'll start with 2022. And when you brought that up, I had 2 words on my mind. Tuli Tuipulotu. I love that man. That guy was great. But like you said, Matt, once USC started facing better teams who were less prone to giving up who were less prone to turning the ball over, not that Tuipulotu wasn't as effective, but it just made it so much harder it just made it easier for those better teams to stay in the game with the Trojans. So I think that's kind of why I can kind of see what you're saying about how it's now I see the similarities now that you've pointed out that, this could be concerning, especially if, they, can't keep creating turnovers like they were in the first half of 2022 when they were facing teams that weren't as strong. Now, I get also your point going to this year when USC is going to face better teams or better offenses. I get and potentially better quarterbacks. I get, Ethan, what you're saying, that maybe, Luke Altmaier's not as good as we thought, But also I think that is a discussion for Tuesday, but obviously we saw the Indiana score and Illinois just got flattened there. So that just got me thinking, is going to be the test we think it is, but we'll save that for Tuesday. But overall, I get your point, Matt. Just in general, better offenses are going to put more stress on this USC defense. And obviously, it won't just be, obviously, the D-line's great. Linebackers, especially Gentry, I'm high on. But obviously, the secondary is going to get way more exposed, and there's going to be more blown plays. Even if it's not necessarily a better quarterback, if they can just get receivers down or just, exploit USC's weaknesses, that's going to be a problem in these bigger games. Obviously, Notre Dame, we'll see there. I mean, I'm just talking about the offenses in general, not so much even the quarterback play. Not even the quarterback play necessarily. I mean, obviously, quarterback is important and ties into it, but you got great playmakers on the field on your offense, they're going to make stuff happen. And that's where I'm really concerned. So I'm looking at the whole offenses in general. So especially when maybe Illinois, but even Notre Dame, see about Nebraska, kind of just scrolling through the schedule, Michigan, Oregon especially, and then we'll see what UCLA is doing just because that's a rivalry game. So anything can happen in that. So I completely see what you're saying. That's just as the USC is going to face these better offenses, could create some problems.
All right, before more questions, Wilder Paredes, $10 super chat. Thank you, Wilder. And quick question, I went to TTU, I'm assuming that's Texas Tech, for undergrad, came back home to LA after, got my MS from USC online, graduated on campus. Can I be a Trojan fan? Of course you can. It's a free country. Well,
welcome to the Trojan family.
It's supposed to be a free country, but also anyone who gives a $10 super chat, like, to me, that means you are a USC fan, like for life, like that. You just get that stamp of approval here at the Voice of College Football. So, Wilder, thank you so much. And it's a good time to remind everybody, if you want a second hour of myself, Ethan, and Crashlet Collier, $150 of super chat contributions will get you that second hour. We'll stay up. We'll keep working hard, giving you extra USC analysis that you want. So that is always on the table. We always give you a free hour, guaranteed. Lock it up. That's an absolute guarantee. But if you want a second hour, super chat contributions will get you there. All right. So, Jeff Rodriguez is making some really good points in the chat. Of course, he always makes great points in the chat. And one thing that Jeff is saying is, what happens when your offense isn't firing on all cylinders? Like, you're going to have an off day. You're going to have a clunker. You're going to run up against a really good defense, So what happens when you have kind of a rock fight style game? It's not, USC's not scoring in the high 30s or low 40s. It's a 24-20 game, and the offense just doesn't, have its best fastball. And, what then? And it really is a well-made point that, if certain aspects of your team aren't functioning as well as they normally do, and over a 12-game season, there are bound to be one or two games, if not more, in which that happens. You need to have the other parts of your roster backing you up, providing reinforcement. So I guess let me just ask this in general. If the offense gets stuck in the mud a little bit, goes up against a defense which, has a line that can, stand up to USC's running game, because, Michigan State, warm knife through butter, or knife through warm butter, USC was able to do what it wanted on the ground. Like, USC's just not facing high-end defensive fronts, but that is going to change. Whether it's Illinois, I'm not sure, but certainly Michigan, certainly Notre Dame. The sledding's going to get tougher. What happens if USC gets involved in a rock fight? So Crash first, and then Ethan second on this one.
If the offense struggles, especially if someone someone gets injured and USC struggling there, USC could very much find themselves, in some trouble. Like, because there are going to be some good defenses on the schedule, like you said, Matt. Obviously, you mentioned Michigan, Notre Dame, possibly Illinois, Nebraska, Iowa. Kirk Ferentz always has good defenses with the Hawkeyes, and then especially Oregon too, like with Dan Lanning's background as a defensive coordinator. Those are some defenses that just given a quick scroll through the schedule, that have me a little worried that if USC just gets stuck because either due to injuries, an off night, or just a better defense that in general, they could have some trouble in those games, and they could possibly lose the results of the offense, especially if the defense isn't, isn't doing their job, as, we're sometimes seeing with, the blown plays in the secondary.
I think if is the key word in your question. If the offense has a clunker, we haven't seen it yet. What have they punted, like 4 times on the season? Like this, and they one of the times was at the end of the Michigan State game when the game was already decided. They haven't punted in a situation where the game is undecided yet in the entire season. And there's nothing so far besides, there's a couple of key concerning injuries. And, you want to go on a rant about Lincoln Riley mismanagement. He never lets people know what's going on with injuries. And it just is incredibly frustrating as a fan because I have no idea what's going on with Jacoby Lane and a media member. And it doesn't matter, people who are in the building day in and day out, people who are media members who, are doing their best to cover this team from at home. It doesn't matter. Nobody knows what's going on because Lincoln Riley has not said what the injury is, how long it will keep him out. It's all vague. So if you want to go on a Lincoln Riley rant, that's one that I will go on. Same thing with Elijah Page. Will we ever know what's going on with Elijah Page? Do we know what's going on with half the guys who are injured on the roster? No, we don't. Does Lincoln Riley have the right to keep that information secret? I guess so. But it's just incredibly frustrating as a fan, as a media member, as anyone who's trying to cover this team to know, the players that they have and what they're going up against in the future, what's going on, how to prepare and how to kind of mentally prepare for these games. So I think that that's really frustrating. But, with my little mini rant on that aside, I do think it's kind of an if. I mean, I tweeted out after the game ended yesterday a stat comparison between Maiava's season so far in 2025 and Caleb Williams' 2022 Heisman season. And I'm going to pull it up real quick because I think it's really interesting. So Caleb Williams through 4 games in his 2022 Heisman season, 1,054 passing yards, 9 passing touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns. Maiava's stats through 4 games, 1,223 yards, 9 passing touchdowns, 4 rushing touchdowns. So he has more yards, same amount of pass TDs, more rushing touchdowns, and neither of them threw any picks through the 4 games. So Maiava's effectively had a better season through 4 games than Caleb Williams did when he won the Heisman in 2022. So Maiava's playing incredible. Lincoln Riley said over and over that this running back room is the deepest he's ever had, and I believe it. Having just kind of the dual-edged sword in this game of Wayman Jordan and Eli Sanders was beautiful, was incredible. Also, a note, I don't think that Michigan State's run defense is great by any means, but this was the first time they'd allowed any significant yards on the ground. Their run defense up to this point had performed decently well throughout the season. Again, playing cupcake opponents. But
playing cupcake opponents. I'm not trying to pile on you, Ethan, but just if you watch our shows every week, we want that, right? We want you tuning in every Sunday for postgame, every Tuesday for preview. If you watch our Michigan State preview, we said Michigan State basically tied Boston College, won by 2 points in overtime, 42-40. We agreed this is not a good Michigan State defense. No. USC would be able to score, would be able to do what it wanted. So if you listen to our show on Tuesday, we were not thinking this was going to be a test for USC's offense. So let's just be clear on that point. All right.
Yeah. I in that game, the 42-40 game, it was all Boston College's passing offense that got them going. They had only 55 rushing yards on the day. In this game, USC had almost 300 rushing yards. So I'd say that that's a big difference. And I'd say that that's a lot credit to USC's talent. Like I said, I don't think Michigan State's run defense is good, but I do think you have to give credit to USC for being able to put on that kind of performance. The Lemon and Lane duo, obviously fantastic. Love the way the tight ends have been getting involved. They've been playing well. Slight kind of step back in this game for Lake McCree, dropped a couple balls, but you had Walker Lyons stepping up, scoring a touchdown. So offensive line also, I think that before the Elijah Page injury, this was their best game of the year. I thought that they were crushing skulls, opening up big holes for the runners to run through. And it was just Maiava didn't get sacked again. Thought beautiful performance from them. So I just haven't seen anything this year that makes me feel like we're really going to put up a clunker against many of these defenses. We all know Notre Dame's defense is awful. They're terrible. Their best game was this past week. They still give up 30 points to Purdue. 30 points to Purdue. Our defense with no secondary just limited Purdue to 17 points. So 30 points to Purdue. That's not good news. Their defense is not getting any better. A lot of people are comparing Chris Ash to Alex Grinch. I think it's a decent comparison.
Me.
Terrible. Yes, including Matt Zemek. So they're bad. Just again, except for Oregon, I'm concerned about the Oregon game in both facets. But except for Oregon, like there's no Illinois just got 63 hung on them by Indiana. Like you pick out any of these defenses, I don't think any of them have been performing incredibly. There's like coaches with defensive reputations, but they haven't started the season all that great. So I just think the if in that sentence does matter a lot. And, if it's a clunker, then I think I trust Lincoln Riley this year to adjust his strategy to kind of slow the clock down, keep the defense off the field. Even if you're not putting up touchdowns every drive, try to get some first downs, try to run the ball, run clock, because he's shown that he's willing to run the football a lot more this year. So I just think that the play calling strategy of Lincoln Riley, I trust enough to adjust that if this offense ever is struggling, which in 2022, they didn't really until Caleb Williams got hurt. Again, comparing back to 2022, they didn't really struggle until Caleb Williams got hurt in the Pac-12 title game, every other, and the Oregon State game. But Oregon State's offense was god-awful. So that was, not a too big of an issue. But I don't like... And that was not, I don't think that was as great of a year play calling for Lincoln Riley. So I trust his play calling more this year than I did in 2022, I feel like. So I think that the if is an if. That's all I'm going to say.
All right. I think we've arrived at that point in the show where, we've transitioned from defense to offense. So let's talk about the offense. And one obvious thing we have to discuss, no Jacoby Lane. And then Elijah Page gets injured midway through the game, late first half. So just Ethan first, Crash second. Discuss just the, how you perceive this offense adjusted for those injuries. Lane out for the whole game, Page out for roughly half the game, and perhaps how the backups and other role players performed behind them, and what that means for this offense when Lane comes back, and when assuming Page comes back, when he comes back as well. How do you think that reshapes the larger overall outlook for the offense?
Yeah, I think that Mekhi Lemon really stepped up. I think first, give him his flowers. He played like a true number one receiver in this game. I think 8 catches, I believe it was 127 yards and a touchdown, and then had the rushing touchdown as well. So big props to him. And then, obviously leaning even more extensively on the running game in this one. Loved, kind of Lincoln Riley adjusting there. There wasn't really a receiver that I feel like stepped up for Jacoby Lane, which is like maybe a potential area of concern, just because, Jaden Richardson didn't really do anything. You had DJ Jordan coming in and on his only catch of the game fumbling. That wasn't a great look. And then, Tanook Hines has had some great catches, and, he had the touchdown in this game, but he's not high volume enough, I don't think, to really replace Jacoby Lane if Jacoby Lane's out for a really extended period of time. So that's like a potential area of concern. But I do think that the adjustments in play calling, number one, I really liked from Lincoln Riley. And number two, I really liked seeing, the guys who are supposed to be the dogs on this offense stepping up and playing great football.
So I think you got to kind of take each injury kind of a little on its own. So I'll start with Elijah Page. Because I thought, especially in game, great adjustments from Lincoln Riley and the offensive coaches, moving guys around and just getting 5 guys in there that were able to still play. I thought pretty good for the most part during that game. So I thought that was great. Although obviously it's not great when as we talked about earlier, Lincoln Riley being kind of vague with what's going on with Page's status, saying, I think he said this, and I quote, nothing too major, I think it's something he'll bounce back. He'll be able to bounce back from, I think is what Riley said in the post-game press conference. So because of that, I'm like, okay, that's great that it's not too major, but my burning question is, when is he coming back? Because Elijah Page, we've seen him they've stayed patient with him, and we've seen it pay off for him that they were patient with it even when he struggled last year, and he's now turned into one of USC's best offensive linemen this season. So I think he's now a really crucial part of this O-line. So it's really important. I really want to know, when is he going to come back? When? As for Jacoby, USC did not miss him really on last night, especially with how Mekhi Lemon just stepped up and was just an absolute beast on the field whenever as soon as just the ball was in his general vicinity. So, and in a game like Michigan State, okay, that works, but obviously I know, Ethan, you're kind of going to wait and see like if, the defense, what defenses tend to be good, but what if it is a good defense? And it's like, in that case, I'm kind of worried because pretty much good defenses are going to be like, all right, Jacoby's out. We're going to go out for Mekhi when they pass. And you know what? We're going to make them beat us with someone else. And I mean, obviously Lemon and Lane are a great duo, and Mekhi and Lemon's great, but I'm just worried that if one of them's out, who's going to really step up? I'm not saying you can't have two main guys, but if one of those guys goes down, who is going to step up and kind of be that temporary wide receiver 2 when USC is really going to desperately need it, because good defenses are going to be able to contain Mekhi Lemon?
It's a fascinating conversation, and another fascinating conversation to have is the Jaden Maiava conversation. A lot of people talking about him in the chat. Jeff Rodriguez is saying, New York City, Downtown Athletic Club, Heisman finalist. And, obviously we'll see as the season goes along, but like, it's easier to make that case just week to week. You see the steadiness, the consistency, not making turnovers. That's so important. Jaden Maiava is protecting the ball, and he's giving you the dynamic athleticism as well. And to me, this is connected to Lincoln Riley's play calling. And I'll invite your comments here, Crash and Ethan. It just is really crystal clear to me that, and this is not a criticism, Miller Moss, great guy, loyal Trojan, wish him the absolute best. Like, he gave everything to USC, was so loyal to this program. He's just a drop back quarterback. He's a 7-step drop back guy who works best in a pro style offense, get the ball out quickly. He's just not a dual threat guy. Not even a criticism. That is just the stylistic box. It's the framework within which Miller Moss operated. It seems very clear to me that Lincoln Riley needs dual threat, dynamic athletes who can do a little bit of everything, who can run, who can really move in short, quick bursts, who are willing to do different things on different plays and aren't limited stylistically, in terms of needing a certain structure, a certain framework. Lincoln Riley's play calling, and it obviously comes alive with a dual threat guy like Caleb, like as it did for Kyler, Baker, Jalen Hurts, etc. Because Lincoln Riley's genius, as we saw in this game against Michigan State, it was less about run versus pass, though that's part of it. It's also stretching the field and making defenses account for the full width of the field. Swing pass. Let's get you over to the far side, defense. You're going to have to go all the way to the boundary to defend. Then I'm going to jab you up the middle. Then I'm going to do an option play where you're going to pinch inside because you know that I can hit you up the middle, but then I'm going to go back outside. And then I'm going to jab you again in the midsection, in the middle third of the field. Lincoln Riley was pulling the defense out, hitting them up the middle, pulling the defense out, hitting them up the middle. He just gets defenses on a string. Do I go wide? Do I go inside? And he's just scrambling their brains. And like whatever they guess, USC was doing the opposite because he was just constantly moving where he was. It was like Muhammad Ali, just dancing in the ring. not giving the defense a clear target. That's when Lincoln Riley is really at his best. And of course, that can't happen with a quarterback who's chained to the pocket the way Miller Moss is. Jaden Maiava is executing this offense. Jeff Rodriguez said he's staying within the plan. That really helps. Caleb would wander off on the reservation at times. Now, he made brilliant improvisational plays, but like Maiava is executing. He's sticking to the game plan, the structure of the offense, and he's just executing at a letter perfect level. So your thoughts on Lincoln Riley's play calling and just how well it's working with Jaden Maiava? Crash first, Ethan second.
Matt, I absolutely agree with you on all of that because, like you said, Miller Moss, Miller Moss, one of the most loyal Trojans we've seen in recent history. Like, you got to give that guy credit. Obviously, maybe his time here didn't end the way he'd hoped, and I'm wishing him nothing but the best, and I hope he has great success both at Louisville and at the next level should he make it to the NFL. That being said, though, he just was not the right guy for the type of offense Lincoln Riley runs. And that became pretty evident. Honestly, I've said this. I've said this here, and I've said this on over the years. From the moment I saw Jaden Maiava in his first spring game at USC, I'm like, wait, maybe this guy should be the starter. Maybe not Miller Moss. Obviously, I think it was fair that Miller got his chance, especially with the loyalty and dedication and service that he has brought to USC for 4 years. But at the end of the day, I think just Jaden Maiava is just the right fit for the type of air raid offense Lincoln Riley runs. And like you said, you go back, look at all the guys that Riley has coached to Heisman's or just in general coached and now in the NFL. Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, even Spencer Rattler, Caleb Williams, all those guys, they're all those dual threat quarterbacks. So because of that they fit better with his system, like you said. And so that's just how Jaden Maiava is. And especially just he's able to really just execute in just with both his legs and his arm. And that's what really just makes him impressive and why, especially now he's been here, he's developed in Lincoln's system. He's really been able to, get comfortable. And now that he's, knows he was going to be the guy coming in, I think it gave him that courage to be like, all right, I got this. Like, I think he starts trying to get more confident last year. I remember I covered a football practice after he was made the starter, and I've heard he was like kind of shy. Now he was like right before he took the mic, for anyone asked a question like, how's everybody doing? Like, he was kind of trying to, like break out of that shell. And I think you're now seeing him just be more confident and like with everything he's doing. So it's been really exciting to see him just not only develop as a player, but also just even like a person off the field too, as a result of just the confidence that Lincoln Riley has instilled in him since making him the starter last year.
Yeah, I think that, Maiava's legs have brought a lot of value to this offense. Obviously, it should be pointed out that some of his struggles last year are due to the fact that he wasn't 100% healthy. And, that's something that Lincoln Riley's talked about that kind of limited his running ability. And, I do think that after you've had Eli Sanders and Wayman Jordan running down your throats, and then he runs an option play and scampers into the end zone like he did on that first touchdown, like thing of beauty, obviously incredible. I do, though, just want to make sure that when we're talking about Maiava's dual threat ability, we give enough credit to his pocket passing ability, because the fact of the matter is he's also a better pocket passer than Miller Moss. Like if Maiava was still limited running this year, but had also just increased in his passing ability, his decision-making, his confidence, he probably wouldn't be having as great of a season, but it would be probably pretty close to it because his arm talent is incredible. He's been making great decisions. I think Jeff made a comment somewhere in the chat. I can't find it, but he made a comment somewhere in the chat about the audibles he's calling at the line. Those are all great. Thought that, the Fox broadcast did a really good job actually of highlighting, whenever he called an audible and what, that kind of meant. It was, RG3 in the booth. So I feel like he's kind of a guy who knows about, quarterback play. But I think that, just wanted to make sure that I shouted him out for that, because I think even apart from his running ability, like his ability to run the offense just as a pocket passer has been incredible. And I think it would have unlocked a lot for this offense if that was the only thing that was working for him this year. But yeah, I mean, obviously, the more talent you can have, the better. And his running has obviously, like on that touchdown play, has obviously unlocked even another dimension for this offense.
All right, before we continue, Now, Michael Richardson, if you remember, a couple weeks ago, he dropped a C note. Tonight, he gives us a $50 super chat. Michael Richardson, you are the man. Tremendous generosity from your end. We really appreciate it. So we're definitely going to address your question in conjunction with your very generous super chat contribution to the USC channel here at the Voice of College Football. The problem with fans, I meant fanatics, is that we expect perfection in a violent and physical game of teenagers played late at night, playing another talented and well-coached Big Ten team. Are the Trojans improving or regressing? Great question. I'm going to hand it to Ethan and Crash. I'm going to give my take first, and it's kind of a connected to what we've been talking about with Maiava. Yes, Ethan's point about how smooth and efficient he is as a pocket passer, really important, because 3rd and 10, 4th and 4, 4th and 5, he's throwing strikes. He is what the 2024 Dodger bullpen was. He was throwing strikes in big moments, in important situations of games. But in terms of Michael's question, are the Trojans improving or regressing? Two things on that. One, I would like to be clear, right, about that question. Are they clearly improving? Are they clearly regressing? I don't know. And to me, that speaks to uncertainty. And uncertainty is not really, it's not the worst thing, but it's not the best thing. Like you don't know you have everything perfectly aligned. I mean, I would say on offense, things are generally aligned, but on defense, they're generally not. And so just that uncertainty, to me, is a point of worry for the road ahead. But strictly for Maiava, the great part, as Ethan referenced, how good he is as a pocket passer. Like Miller Moss threw crucial interceptions. Maryland game, Minnesota game. Miller Moss committed crucial turnovers despite his smaller set of skills and his more limited framework. He was still making mistakes within his more limited way of playing the game. Maiava gives you more ways to win, more ways to move the ball, more ways to score, and he's being turnover efficient, not giving up the ball. But once again, to Michael Richardson's question about are the Trojans improving or regressing, they've been dynamite on 4th downs this season. But that brings up kind of the other side of the coin. What happens when you don't convert those 4th downs? It's not as though USC is always breezing downfield and like it's never even getting into a 3rd down or never even getting into a 4th down. No, USC is actually having to convert a 3rd and 8, a 4th and 4, several times a game to ultimately score. Now, it's great that they're converting those 3rd and 8s and 4th and 4s and 4th and 2s, but they're like, this gets back to the Jeff Rodriguez point. What happens when you don't convert that 4th and 2? What happens when a defensive lineman tips a pass? If there's perhaps one small nitpicky criticism of Maiava as a passer, a few balls have been tipped, and he was lucky. He was lucky that Lake McCree caught one of those tipped balls last night, and that it wasn't an interception. So, what if on 4th and 3 a ball is tipped in a high leverage situation? Could completely flip a game, could completely change the conversations we have here at the Voice of College Football. So that's kind of my little soapbox on Maiava and 4th downs. And today's excellence could be tomorrow's tightrope. So Ethan, Crash, your opinions on this larger question from our donor, Michael Richardson. Are the Trojans improving or regressing?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Michael Richardson for the very generous donation. Also, wanted to point out that he has got us basically halfway to our goal of $150. We don't have a ton of time left, but if you want to hear more talk, we have plenty more that we can talk about this game. I mean, I have several more things in my notes that I could bring up. So, hey, just, putting that out there. If you want to, you don't have to follow Michael Richardson's total, but if, a couple more people chip in $10, we'll be where we need to be.
Okay, Ethan, just before you get going, we say $150. We're at 60. If I can get $40 in the door so that we get to 100, we'll give you a second hour. Now, we don't want that to be a universal thing, but I'm going to say it. If you can get 40 more bucks in the door in the next 10 minutes, we'll give you a second hour. All right, Ethan, continue.
You heard Matt Zemek. There you go. So this is, I think, are the Trojans improving or regressing? It's such a loaded question. I assume that Michael Richardson is talking about this year specifically, because I think the year-to-year transition is fairly obvious. I think that the offense has improved basically in every facet of the game. Maiava's play, the wide receiver play, the running back play, the offensive line play, just in all dimensions. I think that the defense, the defensive line has improved. I think, the defensive secondary has obviously kind of regressed. And then I think, the linebacker room in the middle is kind of maybe the one position group on this team where you could kind of debate. Special teams, the kicking is better. And the punting we haven't seen. I think this year, from Missouri State to now, I would say there are some definite improvements that I've seen. I think Wayman Jordan, came into last game a little hesitant. The Purdue game didn't have a great first couple series, and Eli Sanders was clearly the better back. I think Eli Sanders is still playing at a high level, but I think Wayman Jordan came out and really dominated in this game. So I think that, he's kind of settling in a little bit more into Big Ten football, and that's really great to see. I think that Maiava's performance was better in this game than in the Purdue game. I think that, there's a couple more dangerous throws he made in the Purdue game, and I really didn't feel like that in this game. He just had great touches on all of his throws. Thought that this was the best offensive line game, so that's obviously, that kind of gives away my opinion there. I think that the best game, I think that defensively, Jakeem Stewart is improving. That's certainly true. I think that, the defensive line has continued to play at a high level. I think that, I don't think that there's been a drastic improvement from Missouri State to now, but I think that there's definitely not a regression there. And, Eric Gentry is continuing to elevate his play. I think maybe in the secondary, it's not really improving. The big plays in this game, I think, are a big difference between this game and the Purdue game. And I think that DeCarlos Nicholson is maybe the one player in the secondary you can make a case for having a good game last game. And then, I mentioned Kamari Ramsey had a good game relative, but that's not, that's compared to his year that he's had and not really compared to the player that we know Kamari Ramsey is capable of being. So, and then, there's a lot of other improvements for USC football as well. Like the recruiting is improving. I think the culture is improving. Which I can, talk more about that if that's something that people are interested in. But, I think generally in most facets of the game, I would say that this team is either improving or not significantly regressing. And the only area of concern would be the secondary, which I think is everybody's area of concern at this point.
Michael, thank you so much for your generous donation. Fight on. And I think overall, to just answer it broadly, I think overall USC is improving. Obviously, there are areas that do seem to be improving more, and then there are certain ones that are also definitely regressing too. Like you could probably argue secondary, as we've talked about earlier, and over the past couple of weeks, especially Kamari Ramsey at nickel, could argue there's some regression there. But I think overall, like we were just talking about the offense, that's improved. The D-line has been really impressive. So I think it really depends on kind of, I think, what specific area. But if you told me like USC offense improving or regressing, I would say overall improving. That said, you definitely can break that down by which side of the ball, by position group, the coaching, recruiting, culture, kind of all the things that Ethan was highlighting. You could really go and really just break it down and go, and you could really nitpick and be like, okay, I think offense, Jaden Maiava improving, Mekhi Lemon improving, running backs improving, Lincoln Riley's play calling improving, some of the defensive stuff, secondary regressing a little bit, but you get my point. But anyways, I think it's definitely an interesting one, and I do see your larger point that it's like, I think you brought up an interesting point that fans or fanatics, as you're putting it, do sometimes, and I think we all fall victim to it, we do want perfection from our team because we as fans buy into it. So we just get so caught up in like, oh, we want to win. Everything's got to be perfect. So it definitely, obviously it's just football. Nothing goes perfect, but it definitely, I do see what you're saying. But that being said, I think it was just interesting that you brought that up along with your question. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit, but then also like I said, overall, I think USC as a whole is improving.
All right. Jeff Rodriguez comes in with a $10 super chat. Jeff, thank you. You're the best.
You, Jeff.
You and Bob Springer are our most loyal, dedicated viewers, listeners here at the Voice of College Football. We really appreciate it. So that brings our total to $70. So in order to justify this second hour promotion, we got to get 100. Got to. So $30 in the next few minutes. In terms of the next few minutes, we have one more segment to round out this first hour. But first, here's a little word from our sponsor here at the Voice of College Football. We will see you in just 1 minute.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and then select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.
And we do want to say that if you watched our Michigan State preview show last Tuesday, we told you take the over 55.5, and you made some money if you put down a little bet on the over 55.5. That cashed pretty easily. So we knew that USC was going to score big here at the Voice of College Football. So follow Mark Rogers, of course, in his national college football show every Monday through Saturday, 6 nights a week, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. Now, one more piece of housekeeping here. Ethan has that very snappy USC Voice of College Football cap. He has the camo version that you see on your screen with USC on it. Hey, when you get a USC cap, that goes to the USC channel as well as helping out the Voice of College Football. The other thing is we have these memberships at the Voice of College Football. And if you get one of these USC memberships, just click that join button. Look at that. So if you join at the middle Heisman or top national champion tier, Heisman or national champion, middle or top tier, you get these bonus cuts. And Crash, Ethan, and myself, we've been chopping up a few of these bonus cuts. We've produced 2 in the past week. You get exclusive insider access to these bonus segments, extra content for USC that you crave here at the Voice of College Football. So the middle or upper tiers, you get those bonus cuts. That's part of what we offer right here at the Voice of College Football. So rounding out our first hour, and again, we need $30 if you want a second hour, folks. $30. We're at 70. If you can just get to 100 before we end this next segment, we'll give you a second hour. Next segment is, Tuesday we're going to preview the matchup against Illinois. So that is the forward-looking show that we do each week, the Tuesday show. So we're not going to look at Tuesday. We're going to look back at Saturday. Illinois played a game against Indiana. It did not go very well for Illinois. How does 63-10 sound? So I know that, most of what we do is focused on USC, but just not previewing this upcoming Saturday in Champaign, but looking at Saturday night in Bloomington, Indiana against the SIG. And the SIG is still very lit in Indiana. What did you see about Illinois? Just give me your observations about Illinois. Ethan first, Crash second.
I mean, this looks even worse kind of in the context of it's the season that Indiana's had so far. Like they weren't really dominating anybody and their schedule was not great. So Indiana's first dominant win being against the number 9 team in the country. I think that says a lot more about Illinois than it does about Indiana. I think that this kind of is a clear sign that Illinois is not very good at making in-game adjustments, and they're probably also not very good mentally at like adjusting to games where they are like, it seems like when things start to snowball for them, they really start to snowball. I mean, just had no answer for Fernando Mendoza, 2 incomplete passes the whole game, 5 touchdowns. The run game was basically getting all they wanted as well. And then on offense, couldn't really get anything going offensively. Held Luke Altmaier to under 150 yards, only 18 rushing yards from their leading rusher. So just like dominated in all aspects of the ball. I think that that is plenty of credit to Curt Cignetti. Indiana is a team that if you take this game as credit, they do seem to be improving. I think that Jeff is right that they were way overrated at 9. More and more as the season goes on, it's just kind of baffling and crazy how these AP poll rankings, and this is a problem every year, but this year to me for some reason it just feels even worse, where like the AP poll rankings are so clearly based on such arbitrary standards, and then like the current AP poll rankings are always based in the past week's AP poll rankings, as if they are somehow they were somehow definitively right in the past. So now, like, they're adjusting. Like, should Illinois even be ranked? Probably not. I'm glad that they are. I think that it's to benefit of US. Like, after I saw the result of the game, I was like, oh goodness, like this went from a potentially statement win for us to like basically a trap game, because I thought that they weren't going to be in the poll at all. Losing so dramatically like that, I don't know how you can be ranked at all. But it's like, oh well, we thought they were a top 10 team, so they must have been a top 10 team. So now we can only degrade them to 25. That's definitely an issue. I think the same. You've seen the same thing with Notre Dame, like them being ranked at all. After they were 0-2 and they were the only winless team in the poll. I think that that's clearly because it's like, well, we thought Notre Dame was good. It's like, yeah, so based on your own arbitrary ranking system that was not based in anything that had happened on the football field this year, you are now using that as a reason to keep them in the poll, even though I don't know, it's just kind of ridiculous. But anyway, I think that, what that showed and what USC should see is that starting early in this game and, staying even mentally and really just going in and kind of putting Illinois in a similar situation where, like, if USC can score on their first 3 offensive drives and, hold Illinois to 1 score on their first 3 offensive drives, I think they're in a really good position, because I think that, things really started to snowball there. And if that's kind of true of this Illinois team, I think it could easily happen again.
Well, I think obviously it looked like you said, Indiana was pretty much doing whatever the hell they wanted against the Fighting Illini in Bloomington. And I think really the question then just becomes, is Illinois as good as we thought, or is Indiana better than we thought? Because I know Indiana's been getting a lot of criticism, especially for their non-conference schedule. And I mean, they took some more heat, which for canceling their home with Virginia, especially, which now isn't looking great after Curt Cignetti said, oh, we're doing what the SEC does. We're just scheduling 9 power conference games a year, which, to be fair, he had a point. But then the SEC is like, we're going to 9 games and we're keeping the out of conference, the power opponent requirement. So, that definitely, now his argument doesn't look so great, because the SEC basically heard it and responded. But back to this game, I think it's pretty much just showing that Illinois might not be as good as we thought. And obviously there's a lot of issues with the polls. And someone I've been listening to talk about this a lot is AP voter John Wilner. I read his work every day. Really has really helped get me into this stuff as right as time I was trying to, figure out how I want to, do sports media, cover sports, especially cover USC. So he's given me some great insight and perspective. And one thing that he's talked about as an AP voter is he's even wondered, would they be better off waiting until maybe like this week or next week to really start doing the first polls, when all the preseason biases can really get fully worked out of the polls? So, but he said at the same time, the networks want it because then it helps them determine these ranked versus ranked matchups. And I'm wondering, is Fox regretting it is Fox now regretting making USC and Illinois their big noon kickoff, which we can talk about more later, because of what happened, because of the Illini just getting absolutely hammered by the Hoosiers. So it's really I think it's just interesting. And I think it definitely helps make this football season more intriguing when you're like, oh, you got these great matchups, ranked versus ranked, all that. I mean, I think it's great, but at the same time, there's definitely come with controversies. And what Wilner said about just how the voting goes is like they intentionally make it vague, the guidelines vague, so that way they don't want groupthink, is what he said. He said that multiple times publicly because he's taking criticism for his ballot, especially last year when he was the only AP voter making Georgia the number one team in the country when everyone else had Oregon. So I think it's just definitely interesting. Obviously, there are these like controversies we've had too with the Haley Sawyer thing, and then who was really weird with her criteria. Then I forget who it was last weekend who
Cookie Riley.
No, I forget. Well, it was a West Coast reporter who just admitted she made a mistake with the South Carolina Vanderbilt game and just read the result wrong. But she fully owned that. But anyways, there are definitely issues with it. It's not perfect, but I think it definitely does help create intrigue. And like you said, I think it does help USC that Illinois is still ranked going into this game.
All right, folks. So the clock was ticking like 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, down to the buzzer. Michael Richardson, swish at the buzzer. Yes. Right before the buzzer, he comes in with another separate second $50 super chat. So hour number 2 here at the Voice of College Football, coming at you with Matt, Ethan, and Crash. Michael, we are amazed, and we can't thank you enough. You're giving us this community a second hour of USC and Big Ten football discussion. So just, hey, thank you for making it happen. And we just want to emphasize our ideal model is like a community of 15, 20 people giving $8 to $10 to get to that $150 threshold. Like Michael, we salute you. We thank you. You're the best. But like the perfect world is everyone shares the wealth, everyone sharing the contributions, like just 15 people giving 10. That would be our ideal. But hey, Michael, we love you and we thank you for your generosity. So, it seems logical we should give Coach Riley more time to get 2 or 3 natties. Well, okay, we're going to address your point, Michael, because, hey, donors get their voices heard here at the Voice of College Football. I think I would say, Michael, in response to your point, that, this year is not like the year when like everything is fully aligned. I would say that things are better aligned than they were last year, but next year you're looking at a top 3 recruiting class. You're also looking at Trumaine Carroll's strength and conditioning program having a full cycle to really take root. He came aboard in the spring. It's hard to say that a strength and conditioning program can fully work its magic, can reach the apex of its intended vision, its intended results. So this year is not like the year for perfect alignment, but it does need to build toward 2026 and 2027. And I think, building toward next season would be, you got to win 9. That's the floor. That is the floor in terms of expectations. And one thing we've been talking about, Michael, if you've watched the whole hour, and maybe you have, is that, maybe these Big Ten opponents just aren't all that. And so if these Big Ten teams that USC's playing, if they don't step up, and also Notre Dame with, again, a very Alex Grinch-like defensive coordinator named Chris Ash, if USC's opponents don't step up, it's pretty fair to say USC should be at least 10-2. That, if the caliber of opposition is not elite week to week, USC should be getting to 10 wins this season as a stepping stone to being an 11 or 12 win team in the next 2 seasons. So, Michael, I think that just this year needs to set the table for 2026, and that there needs to be the floor needs to be higher but higher floor is not the same as higher ceiling. This is where the floor needs to be raised, and then next year in 2027, you really get after it. So Ethan, and then Crash, your opinions on Michael Richardson's question on the heels of giving us a second hour tonight at the Voice of College Football.
Sure. Just also wanted to briefly address a funny comment from Jeff in the chat. Look, Ethan is like, I'm super tired. I'm not tired, Jeff. I'm wired to talk some more USC football. You don't need to worry. I got my nap in today during the 1 p.m. NFL games. Had my split screen of Broncos, Chargers, and 49ers and Cardinals going on, and I slept during halftime in the third quarter, so I'm all ready to go. But I appreciate your concern, Jeff, and you and Bob are always the best. But so on Michael Richardson's question, loves Michael Richardson. Thank you very much. Again, everybody else, you have Michael Richardson to thank for the second hour. So, and I'll thank him as well, because I'm always wired to talk some more USC football. Like I said, Jeff. But anyways, so Michael Richardson's question, and I'll pull it back up for everybody, which is, should we give Lincoln Riley more time to get 2 or 3 natties? I think Lincoln Riley sort of started a clock of expectations in 2022 that was ultimately not sustainable. And I think, in hindsight, we can all see that. He came in and he competed for a national championship in his first year, and everybody was like, cool. Like, this is such a great coach that, like, he can pull in some key guys from the portal, and he also has the draw to pull in Caleb Williams and Jordan Addison and, all those guys from the portal that, like, this team is a team that, will make some more portal adjustments next year and will compete for national titles. And 6 games into 2023, everything was looking great there as well. But, and then the wheels kind of fell off. And then that's been the last couple of years. I think that there are 2 schools of thought. I think that you can really kind of hold on to the mistakes that Lincoln Riley made in 2022, 3, and 4 and be really frustrated. And, I wouldn't blame you if that was your school of thought. I don't think that, I think that you can be a USC football fan who loves this program and wants the best for this program and kind of feel negative about that. I wouldn't blame you, because I can understand the hurt there. I think that, there are probably a lot of listeners in the chat that feel that way. I think that there's another school of thought that you could adopt, which is that, this year is really the reset button, and you see kind of the hire, well, maybe even last year. You treat last year or this year like the reset button. You treat, the hire of Danton Lynn, the hire of Chad Bowden, and the overhaul of the defensive staff and the overhaul of recruiting and all of that as kind of the reset button. And 2022 was just a flash in the pan. And this is like the new Lincoln Riley and the new USC and the new way of doing things, the kind of new culture, the way that, they kind of attack kind of team unity and all that kind of stuff. And if you're looking at it that way, I think, you give Lincoln Riley 2026 and maybe even 2027. And if you don't start seeing at least maybe a competition for the national title, then you get a little frustrated. I think if you're holding on to the old school of thought, I think even people who are holding on to that old school of thought still have, reasonable expectations for this season. Like, I think 10-2, everyone would consider as a success. And, even making the playoff, regardless of if they win a game or not, everyone would be happy with that. Or at least, 90 to 95% of people, unless, the offense is playing like a juggernaut and, we lose in the playoff because the defense gave up 50 to 60 points. I think that would be an issue for people. But I just think that I think that 2020, those people who are in, kind of the former class that I talked about, 2026 is a bigger year. And I think if we don't see really, really big results in 2026, then that'll become an issue. But yeah, I don't think that I'd blame anyone who falls on either side of the aisle in that kind of discussion.
So I think USC absolutely should give Lincoln Riley more time. I think, like you said, Ethan, obviously that first year was, great. Everyone thought, okay, next year we'll be so back. We're going to win a natty. Everything's going to be great. I mean, they started number 6 in the AP poll. And I mean, that goes back to the previous segment we were talking about a little bit about the flaws of the AP poll. But in some ways, Lincoln Riley would probably have been better off if, the last few years he'd gone 7-6, 8-5, and then had a breakout 11-3 year. Like that probably, or if you just don't have that breakout year right away, you give yourself more time because then people see, okay, you're actually building this thing brick by brick rather than, just having this great year off the start. Then it's like you got to sustain that success, especially when you have a fan base like USC that, I mean this in the nicest way, tends not to be very patient when it comes to winning and when it comes to football and winning. If those two things aren't together, people get very angry very quickly. So I think obviously that kind of hurt, but then obviously there were also just a lot of changes going on at USC kind of over the past few years. There was a change in athletic director with Lincoln barely here about a year and a half. Then end of last year, Carol Folt steps down. There's now an interim president. Then there'll be a new president in the next year or so, within the next year. So obviously there's just a lot of stuff changing, not trying to, make excuses, but there's just a lot of stuff going down. And you got to have I've always heard you got to have your football coach, your athletic director, and your president all aligned on football and committed to winning. And I think I definitely am very curious to see who that next full-time president is that USC will hire. But back to Lincoln Riley, I think he should have more time, and especially in Spain, Sports Take is mentioning, are they also sort of stuck to considering the buyout, which is over $80 million? I'm sure that's certainly a factor. But even putting that aside, I think he should get another chance. Like, you've seen how he's been dealing with the problems that he's been dealing. Maybe he took too long getting rid of Alex Grinch, but he got rid of Alex Grinch. He brought in Danton Lynn. He got all these other great coaches on the defensive side. They got Chad Bowden. And now with Chad Bowden, they've actually figured out how to re-recruit Southern California, which has been so crucial to, why USC teams in the past were so great under Pete Carroll, was because he basically just was like, all right, who are the kids in my backyard that want to come, that are good enough and deserve to be Trojans? So it seems like they're doing that, especially that they have Chad Bowden to help manage all the off the field stuff that doesn't involving, NIL payments and all that. But I think so now, I think because of that, I think Lincoln Riley should get a few more years to, really keep building, especially if the recruiting class he's got coming in, everything going. And then in the meantime, it seems like he's now building a more solid relationship he's got the solid relationship with Jen Cohen. There'll be a new full-time president soon. And then also things are going good. So I think there's just a lot of positives that are happening right now. And if that, I think that warrants him another few more years. And then in the meantime too, the buyout does drop off as time goes on.
All right. Let me turn the flow of the conversation over to Ethan, because Ethan, you said, if we got a second hour, and we do, you had a lot more notes in your notebook, things that you wanted to make sure that were addressed. So Ethan, turning it over to you, just your other notes from your notebook. Your Twitter handle is Journal Inman. So you're a journalist, Ethan Inman. So let's empty that notebook of yours right now.
Sure. Which Insane Sports Takes just came in with an absolute banger in the chat, so we should address that in a second. But first and foremost, my rant that I've been kind of sitting on for a couple of weeks actually is about the kicking game. And I don't think that how Ryan Sayuri has performed should go unnoticed. I think that because, he missed the one field goal at Purdue, but made a bunch of field goals at Purdue, has made all his field goals, made all his extra points. I think that there's a legitimate argument for when Caden Chittenden gets healthy, riding with the hot hand. I know that, we obviously recruited and probably paid Caden Chittenden, who was the number one kicker in the Mountain West last year, to come in and be an absolute rock star for us. But I just think after how the last few years have gone, like Dennis Lynch was really bad and Michael Lance was bad. And, just generally, I feel like there's been a lot of struggles across college football and even the NFL with the kicking games on a lot of great teams. Like last year, we saw that Arizona State Texas game where Texas had multiple chances to win the game with the kicker and the kicker blew it. Like I've seen that so much in recent years that I just think like if Ryan Sayeri is continuing to just make kick after kick after kick, and who cares that he's a walk-on and who cares that he's not supposed to be the number one kicker? Like if he's a guy who the coaching staff feels like they can trust to go out and make every single kick, like confidence in a kicker like that, especially in college, is really rare. So again, I don't know the severity of Caden Chittenden's injury because again, Lincoln Riley just hates to disclose how severe people's injuries are. I figured Caden Chittenden would be out 2 weeks at most, and it's been 4 weeks now. So who knows what's going on with him? But again, he's going to have to like ramp up to getting back into game shape. Like, I just think he's established so much trust at this point. Only the one missed kick has, made his longest kick attempt, like has made kicks from kind of not, he hasn't made any like long kicks, but I don't know if he's going to need to make, 55, 60 yarders anyway. So I just think if he's a guy who continues to show in game situations, I mean, he's gone on the road now in a Big Ten environment and made kicks. He's, made kicks against Michigan State, which probably had a better special teams and put more pressure on, kind of the special teams line. Like, I think that there's always a real argument for riding the hot hand in sports. And I think that this is a situation where that might be in USC's best interest.
All right, before I let Crash handle this one, I'm just going to say this about Sayeri. We've all watched a lot of football. We all know what it looks like when you have a good kicker versus an erratic kicker. A kicker that you fundamentally trust versus a kicker that you're always worrying about. Good kickers, they kick a clean, straight ball. Sometimes a kick will swerve in all sorts of directions, or it'll wobble, it'll fluctuate. But the really good kickers, like, they kick it in a straight line. I mean, it might be a slant, but like it's going in the same direction the whole way. That's how Sayeri's kicks go. It is a clean kick. It's not wobbling. It's no wounded ducks. No golf shots that go way off the tee box. He's kicking it straight. Now he pinged the goalpost at Purdue, but still, like, the ball was going in the same direction the whole way. He just didn't align the ball quite right, barely missed. That's what a good kicker does. The other thing about a kicker, before I hand it over to Crash, I just want a kicker to make those mid-40s kicks. You need to be making 43, 45, 47. If you're missing from 53, the offense did not do enough. The offense did not drive the ball far enough down the field. Now, at the NFL, you could say a 53-yarder is expected in this day and age. Okay, that's the NFL. But in the college game, I just need you to make those mid-40s kicks. I'm not going to hold anything against you 50 and over. That was the problem with Dennis Lynch. He would not reliably make those medium kicks, 41, 39. It was not money in the bank. With Sayeri, it pretty much is money in the bank. All right, Crash, your thoughts on Sayeri?
I think Ryan Sayeri's been doing a great job this year for USC, stepping in pretty late in the process, in camp too, and stepping up and I think doing a great job and making those big and making those crucial kicks that is to be expected. And like you said, Matt, they're really clean too. They're not just like wobbly or all over the place. They're not just like they look clean is the word is how I describe them. They look clean. So I think because of that, I'm fine sticking with it. It's like Ethan said, he's working right now. Why change it? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I think USC should stick with him. He's making the kicks that they need him to make. And it's pretty much like, if you can pretty much step on the field and go do your job, why should you change it? And frankly, it's an opportunity for him. And I think he should take advantage of it and definitely be able to go out there and maybe take over full time, because why change it if it's working? And he's clearly been reliable. He's had one miss, and his kicks have looked clean. So I think they should stick with him until he starts to maybe prove that until maybe he actually does start missing, those mid-40s kicks like you suggested, Max. I think, especially in college where just defenses aren't as good, offenses should be able to drive further down the field before they get stopped So yeah, that field goal range, you need to be able to make the mid-40 kicks.
All right, Ethan, let's continue with your sports writer's notebook. What else do you have for us?
Sure. There's a couple of really interesting takes in the chat from Insane Sports Takes. He has this one. I like Sanders better than Jordan because I think he's a better pass catcher and is just a faster player who finds the holes quickly rather than waiting like Jordan. He also chimed in later and said, I like Lane Lemon more than Addison Mario Williams because Lane and Lemon complement each other perfectly while Addison is just a better version of Williams. I think that's also really interesting. Just to very quickly pull up what was kind of prominent in my notebook. I think that the main one that I wanted to get to when I referenced the kind of things that I wanted to get to was that Ryan Sayuri rant, just because I think that it's something that I have been sitting on for a couple of weeks. I do think generally, I think this was the best game for like the return game in special teams too. I think that that's worth pointing out. I was kind of, it hasn't really been an issue, but I just, when USC's been returning kicks and punts, they haven't really been getting very many yards. I thought Mekhi Lemon was very effective in the return game in this game, other than, I think there was like one questionable fair catch call, but other than that, I thought that he did well, got a lot of yards on his one punt return and actually returned the ball on some kicks and got some yards. So thought that was good. Yeah, I think that's kind of the biggest thing. So I mean, there's a couple of other smaller notes I could get to if we need it, but I think that, Insane Sports Takes has some interesting discussion points in the chat. So we could get to those if you think so, Matt.
Crash, your assessment of the Jordan Sanders, two-headed monster in the backfield. A lot of comments about who should open and who should then come in mid-game as the change of pace back. A little bit more speed, a little bit more power, open space, home run threat, all these different categories. How do you think all the pieces fit together currently?
I'm kind of been more sold on Wayman Jordan since I saw him. Obviously, I think we all agree that Eli Sanders had the better game last week against Purdue. I do not think that was the case last night against Michigan State. I thought Jordan was the better running back. I think he should be the running back one. That said, though, I think Lincoln Riley should be, making sure both Jordan and Sanders are getting their touches early and then quickly assessing which one's kind of doing better. Are we better off of speed or power, depending on who we're playing? And then based on that assessment pretty early on, make it within by the latest, absolute latest, the end of the first quarter, kind of have the idea, but definitely try to make it within a drive, like maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 drives in that first quarter. And then kind of go with that guy maybe 75% of the time. So I think it's not to say once you pick your main guy for the night, you don't stick with him. You completely stick with him, give the other guy his touches too, but not so heavily. But then if, let's say, going with an example, Riley opts to go more Jordan because he sees him look a little better at the start, and Jordan does well for maybe like a quarter, but then starts to struggle maybe at the start of the second half, switch it to Sanders, start giving him more of the touches, give him more carries. So I think really see how the game's flowing and just see how the guys are doing. So I think that would definitely be, like I said, I think I've more been impressed with Wayman Jordan, think he's the rightful RB1 right now. But I definitely like it when Lincoln Riley is not afraid to give the ball to Eli Sanders if he's playing better.
I think that there was a point made in the chat about Eli Sanders being faster. And I do think that Eli Sanders consistently gets 10 to 15 yard plays on every given run. I think that consistency is really cool to see from him. And all credit to him. He's played incredible. I think though what, Wayman Jordan may slightly lack in speed and, consistent explosiveness. He kind of brings in durability. And I see Wayman Jordan more as an every down back than Eli Sanders. And I see him as someone when we're trying to kill clock at the end of the game that we kind of, just hand him the ball and let him, carry the ball first, second, third down. And, maybe he's not getting 10, 15 yards of play, but he's getting, 4 yards, and we're moving the ball down and killing the last 6 or 7 minutes of the game. I think that the way that they were used in this game was pretty perfect because I believe, Wayman Jordan had 2 more rushes than Eli Sanders. I think it was 18 to 16. I like him as a two-headed monster. I think that, Lincoln Riley has relied way too heavily on the number one running back in the past. And so using both of them, having both of them in the backfield at the same time, not letting the defense know who you're going to use, I think that's perfect. And I think that, making someone like Eli Sanders the every down back kind of limits what has made him so good. And it's that, in kind of, at most a 50-50 role, his speed, it like really is a change of pace for the defense. And it that's why I think he's been able to get 10 to 15 yards of play is, they've been dealing with Wayman Jordan, who they can kind of, they know is going to be a little bit more patient, but he's not quite as fast. So, they're kind of playing him at a certain speed. And then Eli Sanders comes in and just turns the burners on and runs right up, right in the hole for 10 to 15 yards. I think that, if they knew to expect that every single play, that would kind of, you would see his kind of average yards per rush really sink a little bit. So I think that just the way that they're being used is kind of what's best for him. If, like I said, Wayman Jordan is maybe the RB1 in the sense that when you're trying to close out a game late in the game, I would go to him as more the every down back. But I think them as an A1 and an A2 is really when they're going to be at their best. And I hope that they keep getting utilized that way.
Not too much for me to add. I think just the main thing is, it's no longer one running back. That's the biggest thing. It's multiple guys, change of pace. They're both getting a decent amount of touches. It's not wildly imbalanced one way or the other. So for me, opener versus, mid-game change of pace is not that big a deal for me personally. I know maybe others think it's more important, and that's fair. I just think the main thing is it's not all on one person's shoulders. So, two guys are splitting carries, splitting touches. They're going to be fresher. Also, I think this is really the main point I want to add. The screen game. I'm really loving Lincoln Riley's screen game and his use of swing passes. You're giving Maiava some easy throws, and technically it goes in the box score as a pass, but really it's just an extended handoff. That's one of my big reminders. It's not so much run versus pass, but how you're running, how you're throwing, and are you getting the right people the ball? And I'm seeing that. With Sanders and Jordan are both getting not just ample looks, but they're getting looks and touches at different spots on the field in different ways. And as long as Lincoln Riley's continuously mixing that up, the defense can't count on, Jordan's on the field, so this is a run. Sanders is on the field, so this is a swing pass. There's no predictability. You have the same formations, you have the same alignments, and you do different things from those same formations and alignments so that the opponent can't really, get a fix on you. It would be like tipping your pitches if you always did this kind of play with this running back on the field. Lincoln Riley is constantly mixing it up. So I think the variety is really what's important there. All right. Hey, even insane sports takes. Let's just talk about the tight ends. Lyons is a better tight end than McCree. Your thoughts about that, and then I'll put it over to Crash.
Yeah, I will start my comments on this by fully admitting that I am a Lake McCree fan. And that fandom goes beyond just my objective analysis of him. I love my, every interaction I've had with him as a person. I love him for being so loyal to the USC program. So, frame my comments in that frame of mind that I may not be the most objective assessor of Lake McCree. I just, I'm just such a big fan of him, even more so than some of the other players on the team, just because of, all of what I've seen for him over the years and his dedication to the program, all that stuff. I do think, though, that from an objective analysis perspective and, even taking my feelings out of this whole thing, I think that Lake McCree is so much of a bigger downfield receiving threat at this point. And, he really showed that in the Purdue game. And I think kind of just generally throughout the season, he stepped up as kind of the number 3 receiver. And again, I think you could, if he was out or, you started Walker Lyons over him, you could still keep the tight ends involved. But Walker Lyons' involvement in the passing game has really been after, you've been handing the ball off a bunch of times, you switch it up and, fake a handoff and kind of toss it to him on the motion, which is a great play. It's worked, to great effectiveness. He has 2 touchdowns on the year already. I've loved seeing it. And I love seeing Walker Lyons on the field in general. I think he's going to be great. I think he's a great blocker, but I just want to point out that I don't think this is necessarily a constructive debate to have, because I think that either of them would be perfectly okay with us saying that the other was better than them, because of just like how much they seem to root for each other. Like we saw after Walker Lyons' touchdown, like who did he celebrate with? Lake McCree. Lake McCree came over with the biggest smile on his face and celebrated it more than he celebrated any of his other touchdowns. So I think that tight end room is really like, well kind of aligned, and they're gelling really well, and they're all rooting for each other. So I think that, in that same kind of a way, like we should all be rooting for all the tight ends. And I think that all of them can produce and be effective in this offense, and Lincoln Riley's involved. All of them so far. I mean, you even had Carson Tabaracci scoring a touchdown in week 1. So I think that they bring different skill sets, and I think that you can play them on the field together. I think I would still lean Lake McCree if I had to pick, like I said, but I think, I'm okay if Walker Lyons gets the lion's share of no pun intended, share of touches from here on out, because he is also a great tight end, and I'm excited to see what he brings in the future, because I think, with him and Mark Bowman, there's going to be a lot of talent in that tight end room.
Ethan, you brought up one really big point about Lake McCree celebrating Walker Lyons' touchdowns, and just that speaks just the culture and just what Lincoln Riley is doing. So I thought that was just a really, really good point you brought up, because it just shows that it's like, obviously, I mean, those guys all, want to get the reps. They want to be out there, I'm sure. But at the same time, when you have a guy like Lake McCree, who's, really in it for USC, he's bought in, he's been there. He could have probably left a while ago, but he's chosen to stay because he wants to be a Trojan. He's come back for that reason. And just to see him, do that just shows that he's bought into the culture that Lincoln Riley's been building. And you're really starting to now see it take effect in Riley's 4th year at USC. But I think McCree's better, and I guess I'm a little biased too. Last year when I was with Victory Podcast, Keely Orr actually had an interview with Lake, and when he came in, he was super polite to me and my coworker, like shook our hands, like, hey, I'm Lake. Great guy all around. So it's like I get that kind of bias too, where it's like you're kind of rooting for him a little bit just from that. So figure I'd just disclose that, keep that in mind, as for you to keep in mind. But still, I think he's a little better, got more experience. Also, keep in mind, Walker Lyons was out of college, out of football for a couple of years due to serving a Mormon mission, and has now gotten back into it. And I think he's done a great job getting himself back into shape and really being a great contributor on this Trojans offense. But I think McCree's just a better player, has more experience. But there's no doubt in my mind that Walker Lyons will continue to make an impact on this team in the years to come.
I just want to add a little brief note, and before we turn over the conversation, which is that I think what, you kind of talked about, you're rooting for Lake McCree, I'm rooting for Lake McCree. I think my point in bringing that up was I want Lake McCree to be the number 1 tight end this year, because it's his last year and he's contributed so much to this program and he's been unhealthy. Like if Lake McCree is one of the best tight ends in the country, that will make me very happy. And I think Walker Lyons has a lot of time left in his college career to be a very good tight end. And so, if he takes a backseat to Lake McCree, I think that's kind of fair for everybody. But like I said, if Walker Lyons is great, I think Lake McCree is going to be his number 1 fan, therefore I'll be rooting for him as well.
The thing I would add to this conversation is basically similar to what I said about the running backs. To me, it seems less significant that one guy is on the field, and sometimes they're on the same field together in the formation, but it's less about who might be better or playing one ahead of the other. It's more about making sure they're utilized in similar ways, so that the defense does not get a read on like, oh, McCree's on the field, so it's going to be this kind of play. Lyons is on the field, it's going to be that kind of play. It's like Lake McCree, we've seen him get open on downfield routes. Jaden Maiava threw some great seam routes to McCree in the Purdue game. So I'd like to see Walker Lyons make some of those catches. And the areas where Walker Lyons is stronger, I'd like to see Lake McCree be more involved there, because that way it's just, if you're a defensive coordinator and you're game planning for this offense, just to not give defensive coordinators a clear read on what USC is doing. That's the main thing. Like, I want to see guys doing similar things, maybe not in the same way, but having responsibilities spread out and balanced, so that they don't become pigeonholed. You can't put them in one narrow silo. They're able to do a little bit of everything. That's my main concern for the tight end room. All right, Ethan, let's continue with your Sports Writer's Notebook.
Sure. Barry Fisher, very interesting comment. MSU didn't run Childs because Smith knew he would have been killed. That was obvious. I think the fix is maybe moving Ramsey back to safety. Yeah, Barry, I mean, we've talked several times. Jeff is the number one fan of moving Kamari Ramsey back to safety. I'm sure he has, plenty of thoughts about that for you. And we've provided a lot of thoughts on the channel about that as well. So again, I think the only reason why you wouldn't, and the only reason why we've offered on this channel that he may not, is because I just don't know who you put at nickel if you move him out of the nickel spot. Michigan State not running him because he knew he would have been killed. I mean, that's an interesting take, certainly. I don't know if I agree, just because I think that he showed some decent escapability in the pocket, and when he did run the ball, he was kind of getting out of bounds at the right time. It felt like he didn't really get blown up in any. I think design runs are a different story. Like, that was obviously all improvisational and on pass plays. The defensive line, if the defensive line, saw a couple of those adjusted run play, some of those design run plays, could they have adjusted? Definitely. And I think that if Jonathan Smith was afraid of this defensive line really kind of blowing up Aiden Childs, I think that that's like a valid fear to have, because, this defensive line is incredibly talented. But I don't know if I fully agree, because I think when he did run, it was a mostly positive experience for Michigan State. So I don't know. Again, I would have to have seen how USC's defense adjusted to design run plays more, but I don't know if I agree fully.
I think
we had a comment in the chat about the two tight end looks, two tight end formations. Let's do that one from Insane Sports Takes. There we go. What do you guys think of rather using a two tight end formation a lot more this year, using tight ends a lot more in general? Crash first, Ethan second. Do you think that the two tight end formations that we're seeing, do you think this is a byproduct of just wanting to establish the run game, or do you also think it's a response to the lack of a really strong number three wide receiver? Maybe it's equally both. Where do you think Lincoln Riley's coming at in terms of more two tight end sets, and what do you think Lincoln Riley's trying to get out of it? Crash first, Ethan second.
I think it's a bit of both, to be honest with you, Matt, because I think it helps the running backs. But then also we've really only, occasionally one of the true wide receivers has a big catch or scores a touchdown, but it's we really only talk, when it comes to receiver, we really only talk about Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane. So because of that, I think it definitely does help in both those aspects. And one thing I want to add to that is I think it adds another element to this offense in general, that, you can have these tight ends who can, just help both block for the running backs, but are also capable of catching passes and scoring touchdowns. And I think that's just something that's going to help make this offense more dynamic and more unpredictable for opponents. And I think it's going to help USC, especially when they face potentially some tougher defenses in the weeks ahead.
Yeah, I think the two tight end look has been more about the talent of the tight end room and wanting to establish the run game than it is about a lack of a third receiver. I've generally been impressed with what I've seen from Tinoch Hines in limited action. I just think he's still a freshman, and like I said, Lake McCree is healthy, and it's not like Lake McCree is the third receiver because he's the only option. There's a lot of talent, a lot of receiving talent on this team, especially a lot of raw talent. I will qualify. You saw what happened when they put DJ Jordan out there, and his only catch of the game, he fumbled the ball. They're still, they're young. There's a lot of youth in the receiving room for sure. But I think it's more about, these are just two guys that you want to have on the field together. I think Walker Lyons is known specifically for being incredible in kind of run blocking and pass blocking. So he's a great blocking tight end, whereas Lake McCree is more kind of the dual blocker receiver. So I think sometimes having Walker Lyons on the field to block while, there's a play where Lake McCree's running a route, I think that's helpful. I think that also, we've kind of seen the benefit of just kind of, establishing in the defense's minds that like Walker Lyons is going to block, he's going to block, he's going to block. And we're going to hand the ball off. And then, suddenly we fake the handoff and we toss it to Walker Lyons and he scores a touchdown. So I think it's more about that, the talent of the tight end room. And, you can find people online who think that USC fourth string tight end Joey Olsen is a really good tight end. So, and then, they have Mark Bowman coming in this year. I think that, if you're Mark Bowman and you're seeing how this tight end room has been utilized the first couple of weeks, you're absolutely thrilled, especially because, you're coming in knowing it's not necessarily going to be a direct competition with Walker Lyons because, we've established Walker Lyons is no cheapie. He's a great tight end who probably has a great career ahead of him. So could they use more of this 2 tight end look next year? I think they could, with Walker Lyons and Mark Bowman. And I think that's also good news for Walker Lyons because it makes him less feeling like, I've had a pretty good year here. Maybe I want to transfer. Like, I think you're more likely to keep Walker Lyons around if you're utilizing him a little bit more. And I think he's a weapon for this team in blocking and throwing.
That last point, Ethan, is really important. One of the things that we discussed, at the beginning of the season was, Husan Longstreet needs to play. Don't worry about burning the red shirt. Like, players got to play. They need to be made to feel that they're valued within the program, that they're going to get reps, that their developmental process isn't going to be stunted by just sitting. So like what you said there, yes, by all means, like you need to be playing younger guys. How much is the question, but you need to be playing them consistently so that they're getting the live reps, they're getting that growth, they're getting that player development. And, because if they stagnate and they're just, stapled to the bench, that's a great way to incentivize them to leave in the transfer portal. So a really important note about, making sure Walker Lyons is really involved. And by the way, Ethan, if you have a special USC column, I think the Lions share could be a real good name for a USC column. All right, so continuing with your sports writer's notebook, Ethan, anything else you want to mention before you clear out that notebook?
I mean, there's still a lot of great comments in the chat. I don't think that there's anything particularly burning from my end of things, but if we want to go to the chat, I think that would probably be what I'd be most interested in.
So your notebook is empty.
Yep.
You've emptied out the notebook. Okay, so I have an item. We talked about. Let's make this a little bit more Big Ten, but still involving USC. We did talk about Illinois versus Indiana, and we talked about what we thought of Illinois. So again, Tuesday night we're going to preview the USC Illinois matchup. Like I have a million ideas for what we're going to say then, but like we want to keep this show about what we've seen to this point, bigger national issues other than the USC Illinois matchup, because again, that's Tuesday. We don't want to be duplicating content Sunday and Tuesday. We want to keep kind of a wall between our two shows here at the Voice of College Football. So this might be a provocative topic. If you wanted one of the two to coach your football program right now, Ethan and Crash, are you taking Lincoln Riley or are you taking Curt Cignetti? And before you answer that, here's the thing that just really stands out about Curt Cignetti. Not just that he's doing what he's doing at Indiana, a program that had basically done nothing for a very, very, very long time. But more than doing it at Indiana, which is hugely impressive in its own right, but he did it in 1 year. He did not need like a 2 or 3 year on-ramp. And, Michael Richardson, who is the reason we're having this second hour. Michael Richardson with the $100 in super chats tonight at the Voice of College Football. We invite you to help out the USC channel however you can. You can buy one of those USC Voice of College Football caps that Ethan dutifully, helpfully wears every week. Many ways to support our channel. Also the memberships with our bonus cuts as well. But, Michael Richardson mentioned, we need to give Lincoln Riley a couple years to figure it all out and get to the highest level. Well, Curt Cignetti in year one takes Indiana from outhouse to the college football playoff. So like that's part of the Lincoln Riley versus Curt Cignetti debate. there's no question that Lincoln Riley has an amazing body of work, better than Cignetti at James Madison. But right now, Kurt Cignetti is really setting the bar very high. And this is not a dump on Lincoln Riley question. It's not intended to do that. It's just holding him up against a coach who, last year was National Coach of the Year. And with this 63-10 win over Illinois, it's pretty clear he continues to set the bar. This was not a one-hit wonder. So Ethan first, Crash second. I think it's an interesting question. Lincoln Riley or Kurt Cignetti, if you had to choose.
I think I'm going to ride with Lincoln Riley, and I think there's a couple reasons why. I think the reputation is important to me. I think that, we haven't really seen if Kurt Cignetti can sustain this success, and it hasn't necessarily been like an upward trajectory for Lincoln Riley or like even like a flat line. It's been kind of like up, down, and up again. But I do think that this year has done wonders for my confidence, and I would hope a lot of other people's confidence in Lincoln Riley, in that like he really developed Jaden Maiava. Like his quarterback development skills were even kind of thrown into question last year after Miller Moss kind of was a dud, and then Maiava replaced him. And I wouldn't even say that Maiava was really better than Miller Moss last year, but I think that is huge. I mean, he's developed all these Heisman quarterbacks, and he's developed another guy who should be a candidate for the Heisman Trophy at this point. Obviously we have the rest of the season to find out if that'll hold up, but for now, that is my firm belief. And I think he's still an elite offensive play caller who has adjusted and realized a lot of his tendencies. I think that, he has kind of taken off some of his smartest guy in the room syndrome, hired a lot of the right people around him. And I think that he still has limitations, and there are things that I'm still frustrated with. I don't like how he communicates about injuries. We've talked about it on the show. I don't like, I don't trust him necessarily, overseeing both the offense and the defense. But I think that if he sticks to his lane and hires enough smart people around him, especially with USC's resources, his ceiling on offense is what makes me what would make me want to kind of invest in him. And the model that I kind of bring up is almost what the 49ers have had in Kyle Shanahan and Robert Saleh. The 49ers are at their best, and they really kind of struggled defensively when Robert Saleh left, and they, brought in DeMeco Ryans did well. And DeMeco Ryans is now the head coach in Houston. But, especially after DeMeco Ryans left, like there was a real defensive fall off. And now Robert Saleh is back, and, the Niners are basically playing their second string offense, and, have like 6 starting rookies on defense, and they're 3-0. And the reason why is because Kyle Shanahan is aware that he's not, he's not a defensive guru. He knows what he can do well, and that's call the offense. And Robert Saleh is now aware that he's probably not ready to lead an NFL team by himself as a head coach. So what do? They come together. They're 1A and 1B, and they're, and the Niners are better because of it. And I think that that's kind of what I would hope to see from Lincoln Riley and Dan Lynn moving forward. And I think it's why, in my impassioned rant that I gave on last Tuesday, why I believe that Dan Lynn should stay is because I think in a similar model, and especially with Chad Bowden as kind of, the guy in the background handling all the background stuff, this could be a really, really strong program. And so all due respect to Cignetti, I think he's great. I think he has a bright future ahead of him. But I think that there is a real clear path for success under Lincoln Riley. And I think that his kind of growth and maturity, and let's keep in mind also Lincoln Riley is still in his 30s. Like he still has room to grow, and he has, room to.
He's in his early 40s now.
Yeah, but he's still pretty young. He still could have 30 years of coaching left.
Right.
That's a long.
Your larger point remains, but you're a journalist, so I want to make sure you're telling facts here with college football. All right, Crash.
Yeah. I am going to stick with Lincoln Riley too. I think Kurt Cignetti is a great coach. I love all his sound bites from press conferences. I mean, how can we forget Google me? I mean, I mean, I kind of love the guy's personality. He's great with media. And obviously what he's done at every stop of his career is nothing short of impressive. Like, just looking through just how he worked his way up, taking a pay cut to go to IUP, then Elon, then overseeing James Madison from the FCS to the FBS and having them see sustained success to now going to Indiana. And I'm not trying to take away from Cignetti's accomplishments, but the Hoosiers would not have made the CFP if it hadn't been expanded. So that was one thing Lincoln Riley did have, obviously, and Riley did make a conference championship in his first year with USC. Cignetti did not. But I think, obviously they did about more or less, they were about the same. They finished about high double digits, mid-teens in the rankings. So definitely both impressive first years. The question is, Cignetti, can he sustain in it? That's not to say he can. I think Indiana actually is looking like they'll have success, especially how they beat the brains out of Illinois yesterday. But I think just with the momentum USC's got, I think they finally got all the pieces right. Like you said, Ethan, I think Lincoln Riley's realized, okay, you know what? Maybe I don't know everything. So what am I going to do? I'm going to hire people to know it for me. That's what smart business people do. And that's what Lincoln Riley's doing here. So that's what I like about what he's doing. And I just think USC's just got so much invested in it. Everything is going right that I just want to see this. I want to see Lincoln Riley have success, and I think he's got the ability to do it. So for that reason, I'm going Lincoln Riley.
This is a really interesting comment from Adam Childs, and of course, I'm going to offer my opinion on this shortly. Adam Childs, didn't Cignetti bring in basically his whole team from James Madison? Instant culture. I don't think he attracts the same talent as Riley. So maybe the comparison would be better if Riley brought all of Oklahoma. So a couple things on that. Well, Riley brought Caleb Williams and some Oklahoma transfers with him for 2022. And, that's his best year at USC to date. And without that, he hasn't been as good. So kind of interesting there in terms of, and also Cignetti brought a lot of James Madison guys. Well, James Madison guys being able to compete in the Big Ten, so imagine Cignetti never going to Indiana, but imagine him coaching at James Madison against a Big Ten schedule. Does that mean that James Madison would have been winning those games against Michigan, against, the Nebraska, the other teams that Cignetti faced last year? Lots of interesting layers here in Adam Childs' comments. I would say that, Indiana did upgrade from Rourke to Mendoza at quarterback. Indiana's quarterback's better than it was last season. I think a lot of people slept on that part of Indiana this season. I do think that if you put Cignetti in Southern California, would he be able to attract recruits with his way of relating, his way of doing? That's an open question. I would take Curt Cignetti, though, right now, because I think Curt Cignetti right now, kind of a Los Angeles sports reference here, Curt Cignetti is like prime Kershaw right now. We said goodbye to Clayton Kershaw at Dodger Stadium on Friday. Well, this is like Clayton Kershaw in the mid 2010s when just 200 inning season, all the strikeouts, just you expect 7-8 innings of domination pretty much every time. I mean, just Cignetti's locked in. He's in a groove. Now, he's done it for 16 games. That's not nearly the body of work. That's not nearly the length of time that Lincoln Riley has done this. There's no question about it. Part of why I'm taking Cignetti, but part of why I just raised this point in general here at the end of our second hour at the Voice of College Football is that when you watch a Curt Cignetti team, the sloppiness, the rough edges, the lack of discipline, guys being a little scattered the way USC's been these first few games, those things don't happen on a Cignetti team. With Cignetti and Indiana, they lost to Ohio State and Notre Dame last season. They ran into dudes on the other side. They ran into bigger, tougher teams. Comparable talent, games they were supposed to win, Indiana won all of them. And that's continued into this year. And there's one other point about Cignetti that I think is really instructive in a comparison with Lincoln Riley. And it's not meant to paint Lincoln Riley negatively so much as hold up a high bar, a standard, a USC level standard that we should aspire to. And that is that, Indiana and USC, they're comparable this year in that they played cupcakes to start their season. Indiana fattened up on a bunch of cupcakes, and USC had 2 cupcakes before then playing Purdue, a bottom rung Big Ten team. So, like with both of these teams, you could say, well, it was just kind of early in the season or just kind of settling in. You're not going to play every game with the same level of intensity. So Indiana, after playing its cupcakes, gets to a really big game against Illinois. That was a huge game, and knocks it absolutely out of the park. Is Lincoln Riley going to match that standard against Illinois? Is Lincoln Riley going to match that standard against Michigan, Notre Dame? He's going to be hard pressed. And maybe you don't have to win 63-10, all right? But like just winning convincingly, click, clack, skull crusher. I'm just going to rip your heart out and leave it on the sidewalk. Curt Cignetti, after a few cupcake games, was immediately able to get Indiana to the Hoosiers' expected standard in their first really big test of the year. I don't have that same confidence in Lincoln Riley to be able to do that in against this upcoming schedule. Now, doesn't mean I don't think Lincoln Riley is doing a good job with this team. I'd say on balance, his work with Jaden Maiava has been amazing. We had so many questions about Jaden Maiava going into the season, and he looks this clean and he's this consistent. Lincoln Riley's reminding us he's a generational developer of quarterback. I mean, few, if any, develop quarterbacks the way Lincoln Riley does. He is the best quarterback coach in college football this century, bar none. Hands down, it's not even a debate. And his play calling, when he gets the right quarterback, as we've discussed, his play calling last night, he was playing a Stradivarius. He was just, it was making sweet music, just in perfect harmony with everything. Like he is a legitimate offensive play calling genius. And Adam Childs, by the way, he said earlier in the chat, hey, it's funny how we're not talking about Lincoln Riley relinquishing offensive coordinator duties this season. My, how things have changed. And it just shows that, you get the right quarterback in place. Lincoln Riley makes everything sing. So Lincoln Riley, I remain a fan of him. Like, he's just an amazing, best ever in terms of play calling and quarterback development. But head coaching, Curt Cignetti right now has that accountability. You see it when Indiana plays. They button everything up. They cross their T's. They dot their I's. They are precise. When a team is just tending to every little detail, Cignetti is doing that at a higher level than Lincoln Riley. So this is less a criticism of Lincoln Riley and more just a call to Lincoln and this USC team. Hey, Indiana raised its game when it played Illinois. You need to raise your game when you play Illinois. Again, maybe not 63-10, but click, clack, skull crusher. Take your heart out, leave it on the sidewalk. That's what we need to see. And so that brings us to the end of our second hour. It brings us to the end of our show. We want to thank Michael Richardson for that C-note, the 2 separate $50 super chats. Jeff Rodriguez, Wilder Paredes, also with a contribution. So $120 in the door tonight. Thank you so much to our donors for making this 2-hour show happen here at the Voice of College Football. We'll give you a second hour, and in future shows, we'll need to insist on the 150, but tonight we wanted to honor the contributions because we know that you wanted that second hour, especially Michael Richardson. So on Tuesday, we dive into the USC-Illinois matchup, the first really big game of the season. It's Fox Big Noon Saturday. It's ranked versus ranked, USC 21, Illinois 23, and of course the stakes are really high for the Trojans. No more cupcakes, and it's no more Purdue's, no more Michigan State's. Now it's a step up in weight class. We begin to find out for real on a deeper level about this team. So Ethan, Crash, and myself will be here Tuesday, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. in Los Angeles, 7 p.m. on the West Coast for the big USC-Illinois preview show here at the Voice of College Football. A reminder, final, reminder, go to vocfb.com/shop. Get one of those nice, snappy USC Voice of College Football hats. Your purchase helps the USC channel and Voice of College Football. Consider joining as a member. If you join at the middle tier, Heisman, or the top tier, National Champion, you get insider access to our bonus segments. Ethan, Crash, and myself have cut 2 bonus segments, and we're going to produce many more as we go along here on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. So we are going to see you Tuesday night, every show is a big show, but Tuesday night we really kick it up a notch as we preview Illinois. For Ethan Inman and for Crash Lit Collier, this is Matt Zemek. Thanks for your super chats. Thanks for watching. Thanks for a really vigorous discussion in the chat at the Voice of College Football. We'll see you